Hello, everyone. My name is Stacy Nell, and I am the Executive Director of the Kansas African American Affairs Commission here today with another Lunch and Learn. My Lunch and Learns are only like as needed, and this one is definitely as needed. I am joined today by Esmie Tseng, and she is the Communication Director for the ACUL of Kansas. Hello.
Hello. Thanks for having me.
I'm glad to
Glad to
have
be
you.
here.
I'm
Let's
glad
talk
I'm glad to
about
be here.
voting. Yes.
Yes, talk about voting and all the things coming up. Okay, a quick bio for the peoples who may not know who you are. Esmie is the communication director of the ACLU of Kansas. In this role, Esmie plans and executes a broad vision for communications to further the affiliate's goals, creating public education strategies for the success of the affiliate's programmatic work. Before joining the ACLU in 2018, Esmie managed communications, events, and administrations for the Missourians to abolish the death penalty. In the 4 years prior to her current position, she worked for the ACLU of Kansas as the Communication and Events Associate and as the legal assistant. While on the legal team, Esmie assisted with Shaw v. Jones, Alonzo v. Schwab, and the Progeny v. City of Wichita, among other cases, and non-litigation advocacy. She was also responsible for the Clemency Project. Esmie was part of the original union organizing the staff in 2020 of the ACLU Kansas United and previously served as the unit chair. Esmie is also, and this is the part I want to ask you about, a strength athlete competing in powerlifting and strongman, holding current state records in multiple federations for women. So now I will get to all of that. But my first question always when we have these lunch and learns is what'd you have for lunch?
I had a packet of salmon and then some sauteed veggies. So it was broccoli, zucchini, and red peppers with lentils. And then I put some hot sauce on that. And yeah. What did you
That's
have?
that sounds very healthy, and it fits in with the competitive athlete. Salmon, sautéed vegetables, some lentils, protein, leans, omegas, and all those things. I had some left. We had some pasta with the meat sauce from last night. It's nothing
That sounds
fancy.
lovely. That sounds great. I love pasta. Try to have it every night almost. Yeah.
There you go. Got to have some complex carbohydrates. Okay, so a strength competition. I mean, I've seen you in person, guys. Don't let that pretty face fool you. She's got some muscles.
Yeah, so I've been competing. I started powerlifting about, I guess, 9 years ago. Prior to that, I dabbled a little in CrossFit, but really was more of a distance runner. So I did half marathons and marathons. But when I got into CrossFit, I had a really good cardio, but I was just weak, right? I couldn't do a pull-up. I couldn't squat more than the bar. So I got really into doing my own like strength training and some of the beginner strength training programs, and found that I just really liked that. And I've just been doing that ever since and trying to get stronger. Strongman's a little more of like powerlifting's chaotic sister. So you've probably seen it on TV, like throwing kegs and carrying
Uh,
stones and sandbags and stuff. Yeah. But it's a lot of fun. My partner and I actually own a gym in sort of West Shawnee, and we have a lot of folks that we are in community with and do weird lifting things with.
no, that's fantastic. I always love finding out the fun things about our people's lives, right? We do all this work where it's just like so focused, but okay, let's get down to business here.
Okay, fine.
So, we are here to talk about the upcoming election. We are here to talk about voting. And specifically, we're here to talk about the election protection efforts that ACLU is undertaking. And I know I had questions lined up, but you said you can share your screen if you wanted to start now. Is that good? And we can go through the election protection. Or maybe, you know what, before we get to that, let's back up for a section and talk about why do we need election protection?
Yeah, election protection is the ACLU. So it's sort of in every state in sort of a different form. The ACLU of Kansas specifically runs the Kansas-based one. We partner with 866 Our Vote, which is also the hotline number. 866 Our Vote is a project of the Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights, a national nonprofit organization. So they do this sort of across the country, and so we work with them on the Kansas side or in the Kansas sort of area. And it's basically a voter assistance program, right? So we're sort of filling in the gaps that a lot of county officials, county election officials can't necessarily answer every question that a voter might have about their individual registration or their poll, or they're administering elections, they're very busy. And so this is really an effort to be able to provide that resource to voters who might just not know where to go or have small questions like that. I think we are in, so I think 2018 or 2019 was the first cycle that we did. It'd probably be 2018. So yeah, we're in our 8th year of election protection. A lot of the ACLU of Kansas staff is, we've had a legal side and a field side. And so there's a lot of different staff that sort of pitch in to be able to both answer the phone when voters call the hotline, but to also be there at different polls, to help folks there. So yeah, it's super important because I think, voting, as much as we want to make it as easy as possible, I think it's still really confusing for a lot of people. And so having just the resource and from a reliable source, right? I think there's a lot of information online. And now more than ever, voters and all of us just as media consumers really need to make sure we're going to reliable sources of information, especially for election related content. And the ACLU of Kansas is here to help.
That's fantastic. I think you raise a good point about going to reliable, well-known, established places where you can get good information because you're right. Like my cousin's girlfriend may post something on Facebook and that doesn't mean it's true. So,
Yeah, and I tell my dad, right? I tell him anyone can start a blog, anyone can start a YouTube channel, and they do.
yes, yes, they do. So when we talk about elections and voters and the election protect, or I don't know if I'm getting into the content of the presentation. So if it's like I'll just cover all this. Um, I had some questions because I'm cheating because I went to the ACLU website and looked at some of the frequently asked questions in terms of voting, just voting in general. And I know what are some ways that people can register to vote?
Did we freeze? Are you
Oh,
there?
you're there. You're moving again.
There you
Okay,
are.
good. We're good. What are some ways that people can register to vote? Like my daughter is 17. My daughter's 17 years old. So how do we get her registered to vote?
Yeah, so that is in the presentation. Let
Oh,
me actually pull it up, but I can answer that kind of quickly right now. So there's a few different ways to register to vote. The first is to go online to the federal form. Right now, it's still at ksvotes.org, so you can go to ksvotes.org. It would get a little complicated because there is a new law that sort of affects third-party websites. That will take people to the federal form. That's also accessible at eac.gov. And so that's the federal form to register. There's also a state form that is at KDOR, the Kansas Department of Revenue. Or you can also go in person to the local county election office. And then you can also, when you go to renew your driver's license or apply for a driver's license, you can also register there.
so lots of ways. Great. I love
Yeah.
it. So you can start sharing your screen if you want to,
Yeah, let's do
get
that.
into the
Okay, let
presentation.
me.
Yeah.
Yes. All right. So this is our sort of updated and standard Know Your Voting Rights presentation. That's my map of Kansas, actually. So here is, I will go ahead and start the slideshow from here. Okay. So yeah, this has been updated by our legal team and our field team for 2026. We will cover who can vote, the voter registration process, advanced mail voting, what to sort of expect at the polls, and then some of the other issues around criminal history if you have felony charges in Kansas, language access, ADA accessibility, and then what to do if you have problems at the polls. I should say too, this is very Kansas specific. So in the case that you have viewers that are outside of the state of Kansas, I would encourage them to go to either their ACLU affiliate or their county election office because elections are very state-based. So in Kansas, you can vote if you are a U.S. citizen. So very clearly a citizen, right? So we had the recent issue that there is a difference between citizenship and someone who has long-term status. If they're going through the immigration process, you have to have full citizenship status to vote. In Kansas, you must be a Kansas resident, so have a Kansas residential address. And you must be 18 years of age. That includes if you're not 18 at the time of registration, but you will be for election day. So for this year, if someone turns 18 on August 4th, they're able to vote in the primary election on August 4th. And then the other piece that we'll talk a little bit more about later is that you can vote if you have a past felony conviction, but you have to have completed all of the terms of your sentence. So that includes any incarceration, probation, or parole. So we talked about this a little bit. So these are where you can go to register. You only need to pick one of these options. You don't have to do all of them, right? So there is a federal form and there is a state form. When you register to vote, just be sure to understand the ID requirements. So those will be listed on the website that you go to register. And then it's really important every time to either update or re-register if you move or if you change your name, or especially in Kansas, if you want to change your party affiliation. Right now, we're still.
Is there a time limit on, like, for example, if you get married, how long do you have? Or if you move, how long do you have? Or
No, so it's really anytime, like as soon as you could do it the day after, right? There's no sort of upper or lower limit. Ideally, you do it very quickly because
Mhm.
if you do wait too long, then your address is no longer valid. Your ID might not match your name when you go to vote. So by the deadline of the next election would probably be ideal. And so the federal form is here at the eac.gov website. I found you can also find this by just looking up on, if you do a search, a web search for federal form register to vote, it'll pop up. And then state form, Kansas, make sure you vote, make sure you go to the Kansas place to register if you're trying to vote in Kansas. And that is through kdor.ks.gov. Again, you can also look up Kansas voter registration form. And then one of the best ways to do it is to also just go to your local county election office. Every county has an election office. There's always someone at the front who's more than willing and more than happy to help you register to vote. And then you also have a real person who can walk you through and help answer questions. And then the other piece is that at the DMV, if you're applying or renewing your driver's license, you can also register there. And so again, we talked about, I also love this picture. We've had this little meme floating since like 2018 and it's like my favorite. So any changes to your name, be sure to update your voter registration as soon as possible. With physical address, you cannot use a PO box to register to vote. It has to be a physical building. However, especially for unhoused folks, you can use somewhere that you regularly go to. So some folks will use a shelter, some will use their place of worship, or even a park if they go to a park a lot. But it's really better to register at an address that you are at and that actually can physically receive mail. So that's usually the best way to register to vote with a physical address. And then we just encourage folks every year, even if you know you've been registered for years and years and years, just get in the habit before the election, before the deadline, which I believe is July 14th this year, might be 18th,
Mhm.
14th.
14.
Wonderful. And then just get in the habit of checking it every year, just because we do have purges from the voter rolls, and those have increased in recent years with new priorities by different election officials. And so I really encourage every voter, regardless of how long you've been registered, to just check your registration status. That will also tell you if your polling location has changed, which can happen, right? And so reminding folks, make sure you check your registration status, check your polling location. All of that should be available at the Kansas Secretary of State website. That's there, myvoteinfo.voteks.org. There have been times where the site has been down. I think there was a recent one maybe a couple weeks ago. And if that's the case, we encourage people to go to their county election office because that will also have there's usually a way to check your status there and to also find your voting location.
I do know the Secretary of State's page has a lot of information on it as well. When you go into voter view,
Yes.
you can even look up a sample ballot so you can find out. Because, like, for example, my ballot is going to look different from your ballot because we live in different places. So, with the Kansas House being on the ballot, we may have different people on the ballot. So it's a good way to look up who's on the ballot.
Yeah, that's a great point. And it'll have you type in your address and you'll be able to, yeah, see that. And I think especially for municipal and county-based elections, that's super important.
Hmm.
Um, so there's three ways to vote. You have to pick one, do not pick all three. Um, so you can vote by advanced mail ballot, which we'll talk a little bit about. There's been some changes that people should know
Mm.
about.
Yeah.
Early in person, that's my favorite way to vote because it's so flexible and really, I feel like I always want to go vote on election day, but then something else comes up, so it's good to be prepared. And then, yeah, on election day in person, before 7 o'clock, right? So those are the three ways you can go vote. Advanced ballots, all Kansas voters are eligible to vote by mail. You just have to complete the application every year. So you can't have permanent status unless you have sort of a reason, which we can talk about. So again, going to the form to complete that, you can also apply with your county election office. There's a deadline to apply for the advanced mail ballot that I am not remembering right now. But you'll get those ballots 20 days before election day. That's when they'll start going out. The other thing to know is that in recent years, I don't know if this is on the next slide. Oh, yeah, it is on the next slide. Okay. If you need assistance with applying, there's also a form to request if you have mobility or other issues that require assistance to register or to request the mail ballot. So make sure, especially now, there's a new law that was passed, not in this past legislative session, that removed the 3-day mail processing period for mail
Yeah.
ballots. And so mail ballots, in-person voting, all of it needs to be done by 7 p.m. on election day. There's no more, as long as it's postmarked, blah, 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 there's none of that. So it has to be received by the county election office. So if you're dropping it in the mail, drop it with plenty of time for it to arrive, right? But we're really encouraging people to drop their mail ballots off in person at a
Yes.
polling location or at a drop box.
Yeah.
Um,
And I think I'm gonna take a second to double down on
please.
that piece because for so many years we had the 3-day grace period. And with that being eliminated, I'm trying to tell everyone about that fact because it is very conceivable that a person could mail it the if Tuesday is election day, they could mail it the previous Thursday and it may not get there because there's very few mail processing places in the state of Kansas. Most people's mail goes someplace before it even goes next door. So yes, just marking down that if at all possible, I've heard it said treat your ballot like cash. You wouldn't send cash in the mail. And so same way you would get cash around, that's how you should treat your ballot.
That's such a great point. Yeah, and I would also add that mail processing is different for everyone, right? So like especially for rural voters, yeah, there's no sort of uniformity across the state.
Yes.
So if you apply for a mail ballot, and if you receive assistant, the person who assists you must also fill out a separate affidavit. So
Yes.
again, all of that's available on the Secretary of State's website. Once you have requested a mail ballot, and once it's sent out, it will be you can look it up and track its progress on the Secretary of State's website. So that's again the voter view website that the Secretary of State provides. If you have a mail ballot, it will be trackable on there. If you vote in person, though, that does not show up the same way that a mail ballot does. So we had a lot of questions in the last election for folks who voted early and didn't sort of see it showing up later. And that's because if you voted early in person, it is a different mechanism than the mail ballots. Then the other thing is if you have problems with your advanced mail ballot, so Election Protection has had a few issues where folks ordered a mail ballot and just didn't get it, which again is like related to the mail processing stuff we talked about. You've got to contact your election office, let them know, go vote early or go vote in person on election day, but don't wait around on the advanced ballot to come get there. Just try to get out there and vote. And then the other thing to recognize is ballot curing. So probably should be in a different section, but ballot curing sort of refers to if you are asked to file a provisional ballot. That sort of window, if there are issues with maybe you had an ID issue or had to check your registration or verify your address. There's a small window a day or two after the election to go cure and make sure your vote counts. That's different in every county. So making sure you ask questions, talk to the election office, call 866 our vote, right? We will be in direct contact with every county election office and be there to sort of assist voters and support them through that process and answer questions.
Mhm.
Hold on one second. There's someone hammering, and I'm going to ask them to stop.
I will say one thing while she's talking in terms of curing ballots. Longtime viewers of the show will know that curing ballots does take time, and that election day being election day it's never been that the election is over on election day. There has always been this notion of curing ballots. And then after that, there is the canvass, where in each county, the county election office will pick a random precinct and they will audit that precinct to make sure that the ballots that they have, the paper ballots, match what the computer says. Once they are secure about that, even at the state level, the state will pick a random county and audit the county. So election day, we might hear it say, well, election day is election day. Election day has never been election day. There's always been a certain amount of time after election day where ballots are cured, where they're auditing to make sure that the count is solid. And so that's why in years past, when we talk about election questions about elections, the numbers may change as they cure ballots. So that's, just something that when we talk about curing ballots and how long it takes after curing ballots, even if everything shuts down at 7 p.m., unless you're in line, that the election numbers may change afterward. Okay.
Super helpful. Yes. Sorry about that. It was very, very loud. I don't know if you could hear it, but yeah, that's a really helpful explanation about curing ballots. I think folks have always had a lot of questions, and that's always sort of this like complicated process that even I am like, don't know really what it is. And so that was really helpful. So
I've had conversations with people at the Johnson County Election Office that if the person has a mail-in ballot, they sign the outside of the ballot. Sometimes ballots get flagged if the signature doesn't match what they have on file. In Johnson County, they contact the voter and say, is this you? So obviously that takes time to they contact everyone that if a signature gets flagged. So that's part of curing at least the mail-in ballots. So yeah.
yeah, and signature mismatch we should talk about at some point. Maybe not. We have opinions.
I have opinions. I have opinions about mail ballot at all in general. So
Yes.
yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. So in person and and to verify your registration, you will need photo ID, right? And again, ACLU has opinions on photo ID to vote, but a driver's license or an ID card that has been issued by Kansas or a native tribe. And then concealed carry licenses are also valid, and it can be from another state. A U.S. passport, classic, can't go wrong with that. Employee badge or ID document if you are a government employee for a city, state, or federal government office. Military ID and student IDs are also valid as long as it's a accredited post-secondary education institution. And then public assistance ID cards, less common, but also valid as they're issued by some government office. So lots of different options. And then another thing to recognize is, we have had some changes and transgender gender marker requirements for photo ID. However, as the litigation goes on, your gender expressions should not affect, and whether it matches your gender marker on your ID, that should not affect whether you are able to vote, right? They should really only be verifying that you are who you say you are, that your name matches, that your residence is a valid residence to vote in the county you're voting in. And so around SB 244, even as we have had folks whose previous IDs were invalidated because of their gender markers, you may not be allowed to vote if you have not updated that particular ID. But if you get it updated, even if it has the gender marker that that is incorrect. If it's an updated ID, if you've used another form of ID, you should be able to vote. And again, anyone who has issues with this, please call the Election Protection Hotline, 866-OUR-VOTE.
Yes.
The other element was folks who are system impacted. So if you have a past felony conviction, I talked about this earlier. So if you have completed your sentence of any probation or parole, and any incarceration, obviously, you're allowed to vote. You're able to vote. We really encourage folks to get the discharge papers from their probation or parole completion and to have that when they go to register to vote. And the other question that we get from a lot of folks, if you were registered before your conviction and then you served your sentence, you do need to re-register. And so
Okay.
present those discharge papers. It'll be the same voter registration form, and it'll just have a part of there'll be an affidavit that you need to verify that your right has been restored. So that's sort of how the process goes. Ideally, we've seen a couple of issues. The first is that some folks know they're able to vote legally, that they've been discharged and that it's valid, but then their voter registration gets rejected. And so some of that is due to old data that the courts share with the county election offices. And so that's also why we encourage folks to have those discharge papers. So you can sort of point to that and say, no, I'm able to vote. And that will probably require either emailing or interacting with your county election office, or you might just go in person. The other question we've had a lot is folks who are required to register under KORA, so the Kansas Offender Registration Act. It applies to a variety of drug and sex and violent offenses, sometimes for 10 or 15-year terms. So even if you are required to register under KORA, you are still eligible to vote because the Kansas Supreme Court held that it is not considered a part of your sentence. So again, once you've completed the terms, even if say your parole is 2 years and you get discharged, but you have to register under KORA for 10 years, that's not a part of your sentence, so you are allowed to vote. The other piece is for folks who are pretrial and pre-conviction. So as long as you have, even if you are facing charges, so maybe you're detained in jail, that's why we support vote from jail, or if you're pretrial somehow on felony charges, if you have not been convicted and you do not have another sort of outstanding sentence that you're serving, you are also eligible to vote. And then for misdemeanors, you're able to vote regardless.
That's a lot of good information. In my past, I've done some door knocking and I've knocked on people's doors and they say, well, I can't vote because of XYZ. And so just having the information out there that XYZ doesn't always preclude your rights to vote. So that's good to know.
Yeah, it's really confusing. I mean, every
Mhm.
state is different, right? Florida sort of notoriously took that right away for all people with all felony charges. And then I think there's just a lot of misinformation out there, and we would love to see sort of this information integrated into the reentry process, right? So maybe like something more clear that is, along with your discharge papers, you get the voter registration form, right? I think that would be a really cool gesture. So a little bit more on the criminal history and voting. So pretrial detainees, again, are eligible to vote. If you find yourself in jail, but you know you can vote, you should be able to ask the jail and the county to help you with that. We're working in Johnson County specifically to get a really robust vote from jail program started. We found a lot of counties sort of, in theory, have a vote from jail program, but it's just in terms of how people access it, it's harder, easier said than done, maybe. But yeah, you can learn more information about that at restoremyvoteks.org. If you want to volunteer with us to get folks registered and inform them of their rights, because again, it's confusing and they need info. That's the link to do that. And then we would also add that we've seen unpaid court debt sort of used as a way to keep people on probation in Kansas and sort of extend their ineligibility to vote. But if you've been officially discharged, so you've completed your sentence and all of the terms, even if your court debt has been sent to collections and you sort of have that monetary thing hanging over your head, you're still allowed to vote, and you should. So, other piece of this is for folks with limited English proficiency. So again, if you're an eligible voter, you've gone through the process of becoming a citizen, or, maybe you grew up, you are a citizen, but you grew up without you sort of didn't, English is not a language that you're comfortable in. There's a lot of reasons that folks might prefer to vote in a different language than English. You have the right to do that, right? And so we've been pushing for this in a lot of counties. There are several counties in Kansas that there's a sort of federal threshold where they're required to provide materials in Spanish and in English. Um, that's not a lot of the counties in Kansas, right? And so we've really been working in Johnson and Wyandotte and Sedgwick County to try to encourage them to provide these translated materials, even if they're not meeting the federal threshold, which really should be considered the floor. But
So this is when you say a federal threshold, is it the percentage of the county that speaks a different language has met a certain threshold? Do you know what that threshold is?
not off the top of my head, but I could
Yeah.
probably find it quite quickly. Yeah. And,
Oh,
for
well, I'm looking
counties
at, I
that
mean,
are,
Ford, Finney, Seward, so I know that they're just heavily a Hispanic,
yeah.
Spanish speaking population.
Yeah, and I think that's the limitation of the federal threshold, right? Is it's percentage based. So the thousands of voters you're talking about in these five counties are actually outnumbered by the number of voters in Wyandotte and Johnson. But because they're such populous counties, right? Even
The
if they have many,
percentage.
many towns, yes, exactly. And
Gotcha.
so that's why we really would love more translated materials for folks. Um, Let me check time. Okay. And so if the county does not provide these, though, you can request an assistant to be able to translate for you. And so that just requires an affidavit of assistance form. And so someone can come to the poll with you and go to the booth and sit in there and help you with that and translate for you. And that actually, we might talk about this in the disability section, but that sort of assistance form applies to both language proficiency and, mobility issues. And so this is, yeah, again, Wyandotte and Johnson, where we've been working to really try to get more access, more translated materials. And if anyone feels really strongly about that, we'd love to have you join that work. So accessibility, so physical access to vote, is something we are concerned about, right? So curbside voting is legally required by state law to be at all polling locations. And so that is a really important option for people with disabilities, temporary illness, who might just not have the mobility to be able to walk to the poll. And so all polling places should be ADA accessible. So they should have the ramps, they should have the handrails, they should have the ability for a wheelchair to enter the door. Then folks should be able to, again, fill out that affidavit to have someone assist them if they need it. The thing that we have noticed, though, is that, to go back to this, so the issue of accessibility, we're really interested in election protection. We've been really wanting to learn more about what folks are experiencing if they need curbside voting. Sometimes there may be like an option to curbside vote, but you have to call in, or maybe the sign isn't totally visible from the driveway or the parking lot. And so little stuff like that actually matters a lot for people's actual experience when they go to the physical location. So again, encourage folks to call the hotline and report any kind of issues they have with ADA accessibility or curbside voting. Problems at the polls. So generally, a lot of different issues. So we have, I think, on this list, probably a report every season, right? So these are regular issues that come up, and we are very, very, generally we've been able to resolve them without any sort of escalation, just sort of being able to resolve it on the phone with the voter or directly with the county election office. That's why election protection is so valuable, right? We want to be able to resolve these issues. And so you might show up and find that you're not on the voter list. Ask the poll worker to check again, verify your address, right? Verify you're at the right location. Other folks might find that you are at the right place, but your name's not on there. And so you can always ask for a provisional ballot. You can also ask the election workers for help, and you can also always contact election protection, and the staff will gladly help you and try to work through that issue. So again, election protection is there. And if there's anything not on this list, right, that we are absolutely here to help. And so again, we'll have folks who are also at different polls in around the state, sort of scattered throughout the state. So they'll be there in person. You'll see them. They'll have the 866R vote shirt on if they're with the team. But again, if you're not sure, please call the hotline, and that's the best way to reach us. We had almost 100 volunteers at over 160 polling places in Kansas in 2024. Last I heard, we were around 500 potential volunteers this election, which has been really cool, right? Every year the program grows. So again, folks are ready to help, and we're training them right now, and we're also looking for more folks. So if anyone wants to help with election protection, check us out. These are some really important dates for 2026. So yeah, last day to register to vote or update your registration is July 14th. We really want folks to do that just because that ensures that you're able to vote in the primary election, which is August 4th, which should be, again, it's here at the top, Tuesday, August 4th. Early voting may begin on July 15th in your county. It can change depending on the county. Some do the whole early voting period, some start later. But August 4th is really important, and it's a primary. And some folks might not be used to voting, but there's a ballot question that's super important that we want folks to turn out for. So August 4th, August 4th. And then, yeah, the general election is obviously on Tuesday as well. Yeah, I think I covered most of it, but if there's anything I missed, feel free to tell me.
No, I mean, you covered it and you answered literally all the questions that I had. Like you've covered them all. I
Wonderful.
think
Good. It's a good training then. I'm glad. Our
it's a good
legal and our field
presentation.
team worked on that so hard, so I'm glad it's helpful.
I think, and I added in the only thing that I tend to add in this notion of election day not being election day. And so people, when the numbers change, that's one thing sometimes I've heard questions about. And the other thing being the ability to look up the ballot ahead of time as it relates to mail-in advance ballots, because there's such a question. And to my mind, with the elimination of the 3-day grace period, I am afraid for people putting their ballots in the mail. But with the ability to go look up your ballot ahead of time, you can print off the ballot. It'll clearly say draft, like you can't, that's not the ballot. You can print it off. It'll say draft, draft, draft with a watermark. Then take the time to research the candidates, take the time to read the question, take the time to, make some decision, mark on that piece of paper, and you can take that in to vote in person. So I know some people say that they like getting
It's a
the
great
mail-in
idea.
ballot because they don't, when they show up to the polls, they don't know who's on the ballot. And so they get the mail-in ballot so that they can be informed ahead of time, which is good. Please do that. But you can also do that by just printing off the ballot. So I think that's one thing I try to encourage people to do as well.
That is such a great idea. I think I will do that this year.
Yeah, I do
I've
it.
not thought to do that. I'd love that.
I'm a precinct captain as well, and I can do a whole thing about that. And so I will print off the ballot, and when I go knock doors, I'll be like, "This is what's going to be on our ballot." So, like to tell to get people to know ahead of time. No, well, I mean, thank you, Esme. Thank you so much. I had seen a previous version of the thing, and I'm like, "Ooh, I need to have her on, so we can get this on tape and so that I can push it out to my audience." And I should say, I think you said this, but I'll double down on it, that this is statewide. 866 is statewide. So this is
Yeah.
not just Wyandotte County or not just Sedgwick County. This is a statewide effort. If you were in Franklin County, if you're in, any county, this is that they're there to take calls and to answer questions.
I will even double down, right? If you have a national audience, right? It's nationwide too. And so it goes to 866R vote. They have sort of it's like a branch, right? And they'll send it to the Kansas staff for any calls that we get in Kansas. But again, if you're in Missouri or if you're in Texas, right, those will go to the Missouri affiliated staff with 866R vote. So it's a really a fantastic program for people.
You know what? That's good. Thank you. Because I always think Kansas, Kansas, Kansas,
Me too.
but that this exists in Missouri. So yes, that's yeah. Because there might be a handful of people in the Kansas City metro going, "Well, I live in Missouri. Does this apply to me?" Okay. Well, thank you so much, Esme, for joining me today. I love this. Thank you for the work that you guys are doing up the ACLU. I believe in what you guys are doing and in your efforts to make sure that people are participating in their civic duties.
Thank you so much.
All right. Thanks, everybody. I'll see you next time with another Lunch and Learn. I imagine soon I'll be doing a complete ballot explainer ahead of the August 4th primary election. And if there's one thing you hear, please make sure you're registered, check your registration, and take a friend with you to vote. All right. Thanks. Bye.